The bite drew blood. Real blood. And little Matilda, all of 4 years old with her father's silver eyes, didn't even hesitate before she sank her baby fangs into Vivian's perfectly manicured hand. The new Luna shrieked, recoiling in horror as the Alpha's daughter released her grip and bolted across the ceremonial grounds, her tiny legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. Past the rows of shocked pack members. Past the Elder Council. Past her father, Alpha Barnaby, whose face drained of all color as his daughter's desperate scream cut through the autumn air like a blade. "You're not my mommy." And then Matilda did something that made every wolf present freeze in absolute disbelief. She ran straight into the arms of Olive, the lowly Omega who worked in the pack kitchens, buried her face in Olive's apron, and sobbed like her little heart was breaking. "Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew about this pack." 3 months earlier, Alpha Barnaby had stood at his mate's funeral pyre with Matilda clutching his leg, both of them watching as Constance, his beloved Luna of 6 years, returned to the earth and sky. Constance had died bringing peace between 2 warring packs, sacrificing herself to save dozens of lives. She was a hero, legend. And according to pack law, after a respectful mourning period, Barnaby would need to choose a new Luna. For the stability of the pack, they said. For little Matilda's sake, they whispered. But 3 months. 3 months was barely enough time for the child to stop asking when mommy was coming home. 3 months was nothing but a blink, a heartbeat, a cruel joke played by pack tradition and political necessity. Vivian Ashworth had arrived with impeccable timing. Daughter of the powerful Ashworth pack from the Eastern Territories, she was beautiful, educated, sophisticated, and ambitious. Where Constance had been warm and nurturing, Vivian was cool and calculating. Where Constance had spent mornings braiding Matilda's hair and teaching her to identify medicinal herbs, Vivian spent mornings at the mirror and afternoons networking with the pack's elite members. She saw Barnaby not as a grieving widower but as an opportunity. An alpha position, power, status, and Barnaby, drowning in grief and pack responsibilities, had been too numb to notice the warning signs. The courtship had been swift. Vivian had moved through the pack's social circles like wildfire, charming the elders, impressing the council, and somehow managing to be everywhere Barnaby turned during his weakest moments. She brought him coffee when he worked late. She organized pack events with effortless grace. She smiled at Matilda with practiced warmth whenever Barnaby was watching. But children see things adults miss. Children sense what we've learned to ignore. Matilda had grown quieter with each passing week. The vibrant, chattering little girl who used to skip through the pack house telling anyone who'd listen about the butterflies she'd seen or the stories Mommy used to tell had become withdrawn, subdued. Her laughter, once as common as sunshine, became rare. And in the evenings, when she thought no one was looking, she'd slip away to the kitchens to find Olive. Olive Mackenzie had been Omega of the Silver Pine Pack for 8 years. In the rigid hierarchy of werewolf society, Omegas occupied the lowest rung, performing menial tasks, serving others, rarely speaking unless spoken to. Olive had accepted her station with quiet dignity, finding purpose in the simple act of caring for others. She baked bread that made the whole pack house smell like home. She mended clothes with invisible stitches. She remembered everyone's favorite meals and never sought recognition or praise. And she had loved Constance like a sister. They'd been childhood friends before Constance had married the Alpha, before the vast gulf of rank had stretched between them. But Constance had never let hierarchy poison their bond. She'd sneak to the kitchens for tea and conversation. She'd bring Matilda to learn baking. Some of Matilda's happiest memories were made at that scarred wooden table. Her mother and Olive laughing together while teaching tiny hands to knead dough. After Constance died, Olive had been one of the few people who'd held Matilda while she cried. Who'd answered her impossible questions with gentle honesty. Who'd never told her to be strong or make Mommy proud, but simply let her be sad and scared, and 4 years old in a world that had suddenly become too dark and confusing. So when Vivian had begun her campaign to become the new Luna, Matilda had gravitated even more strongly toward Olive's gentle presence. The kitchens became her sanctuary. And Olive, understanding the child's grief in ways the ambitious wolves upstairs couldn't, had quietly provided what Matilda desperately needed. Safety, consistency, unconditional love that asked nothing in return. But today was the Luna ceremony. Today, Barnaby would officially present Vivian as his chosen mate and Matilda's new mother. The pack had gathered in their finest clothes. The elders had prepared their blessings. Everything had been orchestrated to perfection. Everything except Matilda's breaking heart. The ceremony had required Matilda to stand beside Vivian, to accept a symbolic flower crown from her as a representation of accepting her as her new mother. But when Vivian had knelt down with that crown, smiling her practiced smile, she'd made a critical mistake. She'd leaned close and whispered, so quietly that only Matilda could hear, "We don't need to pretend anymore, darling. Once this is done, you'll learn to stay out of my way like a proper little wolf." The mask had slipped. Just for a second. Just long enough for Matilda to see the truth behind Vivian's eyes. Cold ambition. Calculated indifference. Everything her real mother had never been. And Matilda, with the fierce protective instinct that ran in alpha bloodlines, had bitten down hard. Now, as the pack stood frozen in shock, as Vivian clutched her bleeding hand and shrieked about the feral child, and as Barnaby tried to process what had just happened, little Matilda clung to Olive with desperate strength. "I want Olive," Matilda sobbed into the Omega's shoulder. "I want Olive to be my mommy. Not her. Never her. She's mean and she hates me and she only smiles when Daddy's looking, and I want Olive." The words echoed across the ceremonial grounds like stones thrown into still water, sending ripples of shock through every witness. Wolves began whispering. The elders exchanged troubled glances. And Barnaby, looking at his daughter's tear-stained face pressed against the Omega's chest, felt something crack open inside him. When had he last really looked at Matilda? When had he last sat with her without distraction? When had he stopped being her father and become only the alpha, making strategic decisions based on pack politics rather than his daughter's well-being? Vivian, realizing the ceremony was crumbling around her, tried to salvage the situation. "Barnaby, control your daughter. This is completely unacceptable. The child clearly needs discipline and structure, which is exactly what I've been trying to." "Shut up." Barnaby's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Vivian's mouth snapped closed in shock. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Barnaby moved toward his daughter, each step heavy with dawning realization and crushing guilt. But Matilda pressed harder against Olive, and the Omega instinctively wrapped her arms more protectively around the child. "Matilda," Barnaby said softly, kneeling so he was at her level. "Little pup, look at Daddy." Slowly, reluctantly, Matilda turned her tear-streaked face toward him. Those silver eyes, so like his own, were filled with betrayal and pain. "You were going to replace Mommy," she whispered. "You were going to make me call her Mommy, and she's not. She'll never be." The accusation hit Barnaby like a physical blow. I thought I was doing what was best for you. What the pack needed." "I don't care what the pack needs." Matilda's voice rose, small but fierce. "I need my daddy. I need someone who's nice to me when you're not watching. I need..." Her voice broke. "I miss Mommy. And Olive. Olive lets me miss Mommy. She tells me stories about when Mommy was little. She doesn't tell me to stop crying or be brave or make Mommy proud. She just loves me." Barnaby's eyes lifted to Olive's face. The Omega was pale, clearly terrified of the attention suddenly focused on her, but her arms never loosened around Matilda. Protective. Steadfast. Everything in Omega wasn't supposed to be according to pack hierarchy, but everything a child actually needed. "Is this true?" Barnaby asked her directly. "Has Matilda been coming to you?" Olive swallowed hard but met his gaze. Protocol said she should lower her eyes, submit, apologize for overstepping. But with Matilda in her arms, she found courage she didn't know she possessed. "Yes, Alpha. After Lady Constance passed, Matilda began visiting the kitchens. I would never presume to replace her mother, but she needed someone. And I cared for Lady Constance deeply. Helping her daughter felt like honoring her memory. She makes the cookies Mommy used to make, Matilda added, her voice muffled against Olive's shoulder. And she knows all Mommy's songs. And she doesn't smell like sharp flowers that make my nose hurt. She smells like cinnamon and home. The simple honesty of it devastated Barnaby. While he'd been performing his duties as alpha, hosting meetings, managing pack politics, and being charmed by Vivian's calculated seduction, his daughter had been suffering, grieving, finding comfort in the pack's most overlooked member because no one else had truly seen her pain. Vivian, sensing her carefully constructed plans collapsing, tried again. "This is ridiculous, Barnaby. The child is clearly confused and acting out. Once we complete the ceremony and establish proper boundaries, there will be no ceremony." Barnaby's words fell like an executioner's blade. Vivian's perfect composure finally cracked. "What? You can't be serious. We've made announcements. The alliance with my pack. My father. Your father will understand that I cannot bind myself to someone who showed one face to me and another to my grieving child." Barnaby stood, his alpha presence filling the space around him. "You may have fooled me, Vivian, but children are honest in ways we forget to be. Matilda saw what I was too blind and too numb to notice. This is because of an Omega." Vivian's voice dripped with disdain. "You'd throw away an alliance, embarrass me before the entire pack, over the complaints of a child who's been spending too much time with the help?" The insult in her tone toward both Matilda and Olive made Barnaby's wolf stir with protective anger. How had he not heard this cruelty before? How had grief made him so deaf? "I'm throwing away a mistake before I compound it into a disaster," Barnaby said coldly. "You're dismissed, Vivian. Someone will escort you back to gather your belongings. The engagement is ended." Vivian's beautiful face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this. My father won't forget this insult. And you," she turned her fury on Olive. "You scheming little Omega. You manipulated a child to steal an alpha. How pathetic." "That's enough." Barnaby's alpha command cracked through the air like thunder, forcing every wolf present into instinctive submission. Even Vivian stumbled back a step. "You will not speak to members of my pack that way. Your true nature is showing, Vivian, and it's uglier than I could have imagined." Two pack warriors stepped forward to escort Vivian away. She went, but not before shooting Olive a look of pure venom that promised this wasn't over. As the crowd began to disperse in shocked whispers, Barnaby turned back to his daughter, still clinging to Olive like a lifeline. The Omega looked absolutely terrified, clearly expecting punishment for overstepping her station, for getting involved in alpha family matters, for existing in a space she'd never been invited to occupy. "Olive." Barnaby's voice was gentle now. "Will you bring Matilda inside? We need to talk. All three of us." "Why yes, Alpha." Olive's voice trembled slightly. They made their way to Barnaby's private study, Matilda refusing to let go of Olive's hand. Once inside, Barnaby closed the door and faced them both. The Omega stood rigid with anxiety, while his daughter watched him with wounded, wary eyes. "I owe you both an apology," Barnaby began. "Matilda, I'm sorry. I've been so lost in my own grief and trying to be strong for the pack that I forgot you needed me to simply be your father. You lost your mother, and instead of helping you through that, I tried to replace her. That was wrong." Matilda's lower lip trembled. "I don't want a new mommy. I just want you to not be sad all the time. And I want Olive to still be my friend." Barnaby looked at Olive, really looked at her for perhaps the first time. She wasn't striking like Vivian, didn't command attention or work a room. But there was something in her dark eyes. Kindness, a steadiness, the quiet strength of someone who'd learned to find purpose in serving others. "Olive, my mate spoke of you often," Barnaby said. "Constance said you were one of the truest people she'd ever known. That your station didn't reflect your heart." Olive's eyes widened in surprise. She said that. She did. And she made me promise near the end that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure Matilda was loved. Not just cared for, but truly loved. His voice roughened with emotion. I thought I was fulfilling that promise by giving her a new mother figure. But Matilda already found what she needed, didn't she? She found you. I never meant to overstep, Alpha, Olive said quickly. I would never presume. You didn't overstep. You filled a need I was too blind to see. Barnaby crouched down to Matilda's level again. Little pup, do you really want Olive in your life? Even though she's not. She's not mommy. Nobody's mommy, Matilda said firmly. Mommy's in the stars like you said. But Olive is Olive. And she makes me feel safe. And she doesn't try to be mommy. She's just nice to me because she wants to be, not because she has to be. From the mouths of children comes truth that adults complicate beyond recognition. Barnaby felt something shift in his chest. Olive, would you be willing to continue spending time with Matilda? Officially, I mean, as her companion, her friend. Olive blinked rapidly, clearly trying to process this unexpected turn. Of course, Alpha. It would be my honor. Even though it might cause talk. An Omega spending significant time with the Alpha's daughter. Barnaby watched her carefully. Olive's chin lifted slightly, and for just a moment, he saw the quiet steel beneath her gentle exterior. People can talk all they want. If Matilda needs me, I'll be there. Rank doesn't matter when a child is hurting. And there it was. The thing Vivian had never understood and never would. True strength wasn't about dominance or ambition. It was about showing up for others when they needed you, expecting nothing in return. Over the following weeks, the pack adjusted to their new reality. Vivian had left in a storm of fury, and while her father had sent angry messages about the broken engagement, cooler heads in both packs eventually acknowledged that a forced union built on deception would have been disastrous. Matilda bloomed under the new arrangement. Olive became a regular presence in the pack house, though she maintained her kitchen duties and her Omega quarters. She'd arrive after breakfast to spend mornings with Matilda, teaching her to bake, telling her stories, or simply sitting quietly while the little girl worked through her continuing grief over losing Constance. And Barnaby, watching them together, began to see what he'd missed. Olive's patient gentleness with Matilda. The way she never demanded attention but somehow made everyone around her feel seen. How she remembered small details about pack members and went out of her way to brighten their days in invisible ways. She wasn't performing kindness for an audience. She simply was kind all the way through. One evening, about 2 months after the disastrous ceremony, Barnaby found Olive and Matilda in the kitchen. They were making Constance's special honey cakes, and Matilda was covered in flour, giggling at something Olive had said. The sound of his daughter's laughter, so long absent, stopped him in his tracks. Olive noticed him and quickly sobered, moving to wipe the flour off Matilda. Alpha, I'm sorry we made a mess. Don't apologize, Barnaby said softly. Do you know how long it's been since I heard her laugh like that? Olive paused, understanding crossing her features. Grief comes in waves. Today is a good wave. Thanks to you. Thanks to honey cakes and the recipe Lady Constance taught me. Olive smiled gently. She's in these moments, you know. In the things she loved. In the laughter she created. That never really leaves. Barnaby felt his throat tighten. She chose well when she chose you as her friend. I was lucky to know her, Olive said simply. Matilda, oblivious to the weight of the adult conversation, tugged on her father's hand. Daddy, Olive says when the cakes are done we can have one with tea. Will you stay? How many times had he been too busy? How many moments had he missed while dealing with pack business? I'd love to, little pup. They sat together at the kitchen table, the three of them, eating honey cakes that tasted like memory and healing. Matilda chattered happily about her day, and Barnaby realized this was what she'd needed all along. Not a replacement for Constance. Not someone trying to fill an unfillable role. Just genuine care from people who loved her without agenda. As the weeks turned to months, something unexpected began to develop. Barnaby found himself seeking out Olive's presence not just for Matilda's sake, but for his own. Her quiet wisdom, offered without judgment. Her ability to find joy in simple things. The way she listened to his concerns about pack leadership and offered perspectives he'd never considered, viewing situations through a lens unclouded by political ambition. "You see people differently than I do," he told her one afternoon as they watched Matilda play in the garden. "I see ranks, positions, utility. You see hearts." Olive considered this. Being Omega teaches you that your worth can't come from where you stand in the hierarchy. You have to find it elsewhere. In kindness, in purpose, in the small differences you can make. Maybe that's why I see hearts. It's all I've ever had to offer. "It's everything," Barnaby said quietly. She turned to look at him, surprise and something else flickering in her dark eyes. "Alpha. Barnaby. When we're like this, just call me Barnaby." "That wouldn't be proper." "Proper?" He huffed a soft laugh. "I almost mated with a woman who was very proper on the surface and rotten underneath. Maybe proper is overrated." Olive smiled slightly. The pack wouldn't approve of their alpha being on first-name terms with an Omega. "The pack's approval is what led me to almost make the worst decision of my life," Barnaby countered. "My daughter's honest reaction, her running to you, saved me from that. Maybe it's time I trusted instinct over propriety." The conversation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to name. But others in the pack were noticing. The elders watched with concern as their alpha spent increasing amounts of time with the Omega. Warriors whispered about whether this was appropriate. Some saw it as touching, the alpha honoring his daughter's attachment to her mother's friend. Others saw it as concerning, a blurring of crucial hierarchical lines. Florence Mackenzie, one of the elder council members and Olive's distant cousin, finally approached Barnaby directly. "Alpha, I must speak plainly," Florence said, her weathered face serious. "The pack is talking. About you and young Olive. What are they saying? That you're growing attached. That you spend too much time with her. That it's inappropriate for an alpha to be so familiar with an Omega." Florence paused. "They worry about what comes next." "What do you think comes next?" Barnaby asked, genuinely curious. Florence studied him for a long moment. "I think you're falling in love with her. And I think that terrifies you because it defies everything pack structure says should happen." The blunt assessment hit home. Barnaby had been avoiding naming the feeling growing in his chest, but Florence was right. Somewhere between watching Olive comfort his daughter and sharing quiet conversations in the kitchen, between seeing her gentle strength and experiencing her unwavering presence, he'd fallen. Not the passionate, consuming love he'd had with Constance. That had been his youth, his first and truest mate. This was different, quieter, like coming home after a long journey, like finding unexpected light in a dark season. "The pack would never accept it," Barnaby said finally. "The pack accepted you choosing Vivian, and look how that nearly ended," Florence pointed out. "Your daughter bit her and ran. Children know truth adults miss. Matilda's already chosen Olive. The question is whether you're brave enough to do the same. She's Omega. Alpha. The rules. The rules were written by wolves long dead who never met Olive Mackenzie," Florence interrupted. "I've watched that girl for years. She has more strength in her smallest finger than most of our ranked wolves have in their entire bodies. Omega is a station, not a soul. And if you can't see past her rank to her worth, then perhaps you're not the alpha I thought you were." The gentle rebuke stung because it was true. Wasn't he doing exactly what Vivian had done? Seeing station before heart. Letting hierarchy blind him to what actually mattered. That evening, Barnaby found Olive in the garden with Matilda, the two of them collecting herbs in the fading light. His daughter's happy chatter drifted on the breeze, and something in his chest pulled tight with longing. Not just for Olive but for this peace, this simple joy. This family that had built itself organically from grief and need and genuine care. "Olive, may I speak with you?" he called softly. She looked up, nodded, and said something to Matilda that made the little girl giggle before running off to show her herb basket to one of the gardeners. "Is something wrong?" Olive asked as he approached, concern immediate in her features. "Always thinking of others first." "No. Maybe." Barnaby ran a hand through his hair. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Always, Alpha." "Barnaby," he corrected gently. "Please." She hesitated, then nodded. "Barnaby." These past months spending time together with Matilda, talking, just being present. Has it been duty for you? Obligation? Olive's brow furrowed. "Of course not. I care deeply for Matilda. And I've come to value our conversations." "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if I'm seeing things that aren't there, or if you feel it too." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "This thing growing between us. This comfort. This connection. Or am I alone in it?" Her breath caught. For a long moment, she just stared at him, emotions warring across her usually serene face. "You're not alone in it," she finally whispered. "But it doesn't matter." "Why not?" "Because I'm Omega. Because the pack would never accept it. Because you're still grieving your mate and Matilda needs stability, not more upheaval." The words tumbled out. "Because I know my place, and it's not beside an alpha." "What if I want to change your place?" "You can't just rewrite pack law because you..." She stopped abruptly. "Because I what?" he pressed gently. "Because you're grateful to me for helping Matilda," she finished, but they both knew that wasn't what she'd almost said. "Olive." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. She trembled at the contact but didn't retreat. "I'm not confused. I'm not mistaking gratitude for something else. I'm falling in love with you. With your kindness and your strength. With the way you see the best in people. With how you made my daughter laugh again when I thought that sound was lost forever. With who you are, not what you do for us." Tears welled in her eyes. "The pack will never allow it. The pack serves me, not the other way around. And more importantly, Matilda has already chosen you. She did that the day she bit Vivian and ran into your arms." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking you to replace Constance. No one could or should. But I'm asking if you might consider building something new with me. With us." "I don't know how to be a Luna," Olive whispered. "Constance once told me that being Luna wasn't about rank or power. It was about loving the pack so completely that you'd give everything for them. You've been doing that your entire life from the kitchens. You just didn't have the title." A tear escaped down Olive's cheek. "The elders will fight this. Some will. Others might surprise us. But I'm done making decisions based on what others think I should do. That almost led me to Vivian. This time I'm following my heart. And my daughter's wisdom." He smiled slightly. "What do you say, Olive? Will you take a chance on a grieving alpha and his fierce little pup?" For answer, Olive stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest, a gesture of trust and surrender that made his heart soar. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But yes, for sure. If Matilda truly wants this." "Yes." From across the garden, a small voice piped up. "Finally. I was wondering when you'd figure it out." They sprang apart to find Matilda grinning at them from behind a rosebush, clearly having spied on the entire conversation. "Little eavesdropper," Barnaby said, but he was smiling. Matilda ran to them, throwing her arms around both their legs. "Does this mean Olive can stay forever? Not as my new mommy, but as Olive. As part of our family." Barnaby looked down at his daughter, then at Olive, and felt something settle in his soul. "Yes, little pup. If she'll have us." "I will," Olive said softly, and Matilda squealed with joy. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There were elders to convince, traditions to navigate, and pack members who would struggle with an Omega rising to Luna. But as Barnaby held his daughter's hand and stood beside Olive in the fading garden light, He knew they'd face it together. The first challenge came within days. 3 senior pack members, led by Sterling Blackwood, demanded an emergency council meeting. Sterling was old guard, a warrior who'd served under Barnaby's father, and who believed in hierarchy the way some wolves believe in the moon. Unmovable. Absolute. "This is madness," Sterling declared before the assembled council. "An omega as Luna. It spits in the face of everything our pack stands for. Order, rank, structure. You're letting a child's tantrum dictate pack leadership." Barnaby remained calm, though his wolf stirred at the disrespect. "My daughter didn't throw a tantrum, Sterling. She recognized deception I was too blind to see. She saw Vivian's true nature and rejected it. That wasn't childish emotion. That was alpha instinct showing itself early. She ran to an omega." Sterling's voice rose. "What message does that send? That rank means nothing. That any wolf can aspire to any position. Chaos, that's what it brings. It sends the message that character matters more than station." Olive's quiet voice cut through the tension. Every head turned to her in shock. Omegas didn't speak at council meetings. Ever. But Olive, with Barnaby's encouraging nod, continued. "I understand your concerns, Sterling. Truly I do. You've built your entire life on a structure that made sense to you. But consider this. I've served this pack for 8 years from the kitchens. I know every pack member's name, their favorite foods, their struggles, their joys. I've mended clothes for warriors headed to battle. I've baked celebration cakes for new parents. I've held space for grief and for celebration. I've already been serving this pack with everything I have. The only thing changing is the title." Sterling's jaw worked, but he had no immediate response. Florence Mackenzie leaned forward. "The girl has a point, Sterling. Being Luna isn't about dominance. It's about service." Constance understood that. Perhaps it's time we remembered what Luna actually means. The debate raged for hours. Some elders sided with Sterling, arguing that breaking with tradition would weaken the pack structure. Others, particularly the older females who'd worked alongside Olive over the years, spoke of her character, her dedication, her genuine care for pack members regardless of their rank. Finally, Adelaide Thompson, the most senior female elder, raised her hand for silence. At 93, she'd seen 4 alphas lead the Silverpine pack. When she spoke, everyone listened. "I knew Constance before she became Luna," Adelaide said, her voice thin but clear. "She was the daughter of our previous alpha, born into privilege and rank. And do you know what she told me on her mating day? She said, 'Adelaide, I'm terrified. Not of being Luna, but of forgetting what it's like to be ordinary. Of losing sight of the pack members who serve without recognition.' She made a point of spending time in the kitchens, in the laundry, with the omegas and lower-ranked wolves. Because she understood something crucial. A Luna must see all her people, not just the powerful ones." Adelaide's ancient eyes moved to Olive. "This young woman already sees all her people. She's been doing Luna's work without the title for years. Perhaps the moon goddess sent her to us precisely because we'd forgotten what truly matters. Perhaps Matilda's rejection of Vivian was divine intervention, not childish impulse." The invocation of the moon goddess shifted the energy in the room. Wolves were spiritual creatures, and the idea that destiny might be at play rather than mere chaos gave even Sterling pause. "A trial period," Adelaide proposed. 3 months. Let Olive serve as provisional Luna. If the pack suffers, if chaos ensues as Sterling fears, then we revisit the decision. But if the pack thrives, if this unorthodox choice proves wise, then we accept that perhaps the old ways aren't the only ways. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was compromise. After more discussion, the council voted. The result was narrow, 5 in favor, 4 against, but it was enough. Olive had 3 months to prove herself. The weight of scrutiny would have broken a lesser wolf. Every decision Olive made was examined, questioned, judged. When she organized a community meal that brought the entire pack together, Sterling grumbled it was a waste of resources. When she started a mentorship program pairing experienced wolves with younger ones, critics said she was overstepping and disrupting established training protocols. But quietly, steadily, changes began to ripple through the pack. The kitchen staff, long invisible, found themselves consulted about pack events and supplies. Young mothers discovered Olive had created a support network so they didn't have to choose between pack duties and caring for pups. Elderly wolves received regular visits and assistance with tasks that had become difficult. Olive didn't demand recognition or authority. She simply showed up day after day, seeing needs and filling them. Just as she'd always done, but now with resources and support to do it more effectively. Matilda thrived under the new arrangement. She still missed her mother. That grief would always be part of her, but she'd stopped withdrawing into herself. She laughed again, played with other pups, and she watched Olive with fierce, protective pride, ready to defend her chosen adult against anyone who spoke ill of her. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into the trial period, a situation arose that would test Olive's position more severely than any council debate. A group of young warriors, emboldened by the faction that opposed Olive's rise, decided to test the Omega Luna. They ignored her requests to help prepare for an upcoming ceremony. They made jokes within her hearing about knowing her place. They treated her with barely veiled contempt. Barnaby was away, negotiating with a neighboring pack. Olive was effectively alone in her authority, with no alpha to back her up. The warriors gathered in the main hall, deliberately making a mess and lounging around instead of completing their assigned tasks. When Olive approached them, their leader, a young male named Jasper, smirked openly. "Something we can help you with, Omega?" The title was deliberately used, a reminder of what she'd been. Olive could have retreated, could have waited for Barnaby's return, could have asked higher-ranked wolves to intervene. But in that moment, with pack members watching to see how she'd handle disrespect, Olive made a choice. She met Jasper's eyes steadily. "Yes, actually. You can help by completing the tasks you committed to, or you can explain to Alpha Barnaby why you felt your pride was more important than your word." "Our word was given to the Alpha, not to an Omega playing dress-up," Jasper said, and his companions laughed. "Your word was given to the pack," Olive corrected calmly. "I'm simply holding you to it. You're warriors, aren't you? Doesn't that mean something? Or is strength only for the battlefield, not for keeping promises?" The subtle challenge hit its mark. Warriors prided themselves on honor. "We take orders from ranked wolves," Jasper insisted, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "Then take them from me." The new voice came from Adelaide Thompson, who'd entered unnoticed. The ancient elder moved slowly but with undeniable authority. "I'm ranked enough for you, boy. And I'm ordering you to complete your tasks and apologize to your Luna." "She's not Luna yet," Jasper muttered. "Just provisional. She's more Luna in her smallest finger than you are warrior in your entire body," Adelaide snapped. "Luna Constance would be ashamed of this display. You dishonor her memory with this childishness." The invocation of Constance's name had power. The young warriors shifted uncomfortably. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Florence Mackenzie entered, along with several other pack members who'd been watching from doorways. And more, until dozens of wolves filled the hall, all standing clearly on Olive's side of the room. "Enough of this," Florence said firmly. "Olive has served this pack faithfully for years. She's earned respect, provisional title or not. Anyone who can't see that is blind, stupid, or both." The show of support was overwhelming. Jasper and his companions found themselves vastly outnumbered by pack members who decided Olive was worth defending. Even some of Sterling's faction looked uncomfortable with how far the young warriors had pushed things. Jasper, realizing he'd badly miscalculated, dropped his gaze. "I apologize, Luna Olive. We'll complete our tasks." Olive could have been petty, could have demanded more groveling or reported them to Barnaby for discipline. Instead, she simply nodded. "Thank you. Your help is appreciated." The grace of that response, The refusal to humiliate wolves who tried to humiliate her resonated through the pack. This was what true strength looked like. Not dominance but dignity. Not crushing opposition, but extending grace even to those who opposed you. When Barnaby returned that evening and heard what had happened, he found Olive in the garden with Matilda, both of them peaceful and unbothered. "I heard you had an interesting afternoon," he said carefully. Olive looked up with a slight smile. "Pack dynamics can be complicated. We worked it out. You didn't have to face that alone. I should have been here. You had Alpha business. I had Luna business." She said it simply without fanfare. "Besides, I wasn't alone. Pack stood with me. That meant more than any title could." Barnaby sat beside her, marveling at her composure. "You're handling this better than I did when I first became Alpha." "Different challenges require different strengths," Olive said. "You lead with authority and decisiveness. I lead with connection and service. Neither is wrong. They're just different. Complementary," Barnaby realized aloud. "Constance led like you do. I'd forgotten how effective that approach can be." The 3-month trial period ended with a formal council meeting. Sterling, to his credit, stood and spoke honestly. "I opposed this decision," he said bluntly. "I thought it would weaken us, divide us, destroy the structure that keeps us strong. I was wrong." The admission clearly cost him. "Olive has proven that strength comes in forms I didn't recognize. The pack is more unified now than it's been in years. Wolves who felt unseen now feel valued. We're stronger for this change, not weaker. I vote to confirm her as Luna." The vote was unanimous. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes from the gentlest hearts. Sometimes the most powerful choice is choosing love over protocol. And sometimes a child's honest cry of "you're not my mommy" is actually a blessing in disguise, saving you from a beautiful mistake and pointing you toward an unexpected grace. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning much like the one where Matilda had bitten Vivian and changed all their fates, the Silver Pine pack gathered again for a Luna ceremony. This time, there were no elaborate decorations or political alliances at stake. Just simple flowers from the garden, honest words, and a little girl standing proudly beside her father as he took Olive's hand. Some pack members had grumbled. A few had even left, unable to accept an Omega as Luna. But most had stayed, because they'd watched the transformation in their Alpha and his daughter. They'd seen Barnaby become present again, seen Matilda's joy return, seen Olive's quiet grace extend to the entire pack as she began to truly step into her new role. Florence Mackenzie, performing the ceremony as eldest elder, smiled as she bound their hands with ribbon. "In choosing each other, you've reminded us all that strength comes in many forms, that rank is not worth, that the greatest leaders often come from unexpected places." She looked at Olive directly. "Welcome, Luna. We are honored by your service, and humbled by your heart." Olive's eyes shone with tears as she looked out at the pack. "Or pack now. I promise to serve you with everything I am, to see your hearts, not just your ranks, to honor Lady Constance's memory by caring for this family the way she taught me." And when Barnaby kissed his new mate, when Matilda threw flower petals in the air with unrestrained glee, when the pack howled their approval to the sky, it felt right. Not like a replacement or a second chance, but like a new chapter. Different, but full of its own particular grace. That evening, as the three of them sat in the garden sharing honey cakes and watching stars emerge, Matilda leaned against Olive's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "What are you thinking, little pup?" Barnaby asked. "I'm thinking Mommy would like this," Matilda said simply. "She told me once that love wasn't a pie where you run out of pieces, that the heart just grows bigger to fit all the people who belong there. I think she'd be happy her friend is taking care of us now." Olive's breath hitched with emotion, and Barnaby pulled them both closer. Out of grief and nearly catastrophic mistakes, something beautiful had grown. A family rebuilt not on tradition or obligation, but on genuine love and a 4-year-old's fierce instinct for truth. Sometimes the bite that draws blood is really an act of salvation. Sometimes running away is really running toward what you truly need. And sometimes the person standing quietly in the background, asking for nothing, is actually offering everything. The Omega Luna and her Alpha, the fierce little pup who'd chosen wisely, and a pack learning that strength comes in gentleness, that rank is not worth, and that sometimes the greatest gift is simply showing up with honest love. This is their story. A tale of second chances, honest hearts, and the revolutionary act of choosing connection over convention. And it started with a bite, a scream, and a child's desperate truth. "You're not my mommy." The best decisions often do.